Welcome to IBGTV. I'm Mike Hill, your host. Today, I've got Scott Begay, one of our coaches, and we're going to be following up on our previous podcast where we talked about the importance of a guest interview and moving from the guest interview now back into the office and creating the need and the want for all the products we're going to be offering during our menu presentation. With that said, welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Mike. Good to be here with you.
Well, it's good to have you here. We were talking in previous conversations, Scott, the importance of boot camp basics and the importance of once a person has gone to boot camp, implementing those boot camp basics and taking them back and using it every time, with every single guest. What are you seeing when you have an attendee that just came to boot camp, go back to the dealership? How are they doing?
It depends on the individual, of course. Some of our boot camp attendees are more seasoned, more comfortable with the guest than maybe someone new to finance, even though they may have gone through the process as far as being a client advisor. So being on the sales floor, they've had exposure to the guests and those conversations and things of that nature. However, when we've had seasoned finance manager, meaning years under their belt of experience, they tend to be more comfortable with that guest. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're more successful than the individual that may have a year of experience in the automotive industry, going through boot camp and then into the finance office. It really depends on the individual, in my opinion. However, what I do find is that sometimes we get a little caught up in what may be considered the script from boot camp. We want to keep certain parameters, and we want to make sure that our guest is getting the full exposure to, as we call it, the need and the want through the why for the programs. If we're not following a process, and we do have a process in the finance office, whether it's whether it's written down or not, there is a process that we follow. Just as a client advisor, a sales associate follows a process. It might be a 10-step process. That might be a 7, but you can go through any dealership in the U.S. and they have a sales process. Well, we've got to remember that in finance we do too. As you had mentioned, the guest interview really is the first step in the process. Now, you may be able to argue that by saying, well, no, the first step is the deal comes into the finance office and we load it in the computer, et cetera, et cetera. But what I'm talking about is that the interaction with the guest and the process going forward. If we're skipping those steps, we're really minimizing the chances of that guest, again, seeing the need for the programs that we are offering. So, as you had mentioned, the first step is that guest interview, making sure that we are out on the showroom with a guest in their comfort zone. So, it used to be where years ago when I started in finance, a million years ago, the finance manager would pick up the phone and page the salesperson to bring their guests to the finance office. Unfortunately, that was the first experience that the guest had with this new individual.
This being led to the drag to the finance office, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they hear over the intercom, "Bring your guests to finance." A little startling thing because they're not. Back then, they weren't really 100% sure what was going to take place in the process. The salesperson may have said, well, we're going to do your paperwork now, and John is going to do your paperwork. I'll go introduce you to John or whoever it might be. And that's a little uncomfortable for the guest. Going from their comfort zone, which is the showroom or the desk where the associate was going through all the information with them and buttoning up the sale of the vehicle in regards to the yes or no. The folks saying, yes, this is the vehicle that I want to take home today. Where what found now is that the finance manager going out into their comfort zone and introducing themselves. That way, this is the first interaction that they're going to have, and the first time that they meet this this finance manager, this new person, and it can be a much better experience for the guests. So then, I think on the last podcast we went through the do's and don'ts in that process, but there are steps that we want to follow in that process. Again, in ensuring the guests that we're going to take care of them. Number one, we're thanking them for coming to our facility to purchase their vehicle, because we know they have choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
Congratulate them on their purchase. Then we sit down and kind of explain to them what's going to take place as far as the process when we do go back to the finance office. So
it's interesting that you say that. It seems like even we talk about this in boot camp, that as soon as the deal jacket goes to the finance manager is told that the guest is in a hurry. And the fact that during that interview process, that's one of the things that we can talk about, is letting the guests know that we understand that they are in a hurry and that time is of the essence. And where at many dealerships, this process of paperwork could take 2 to 3 hours, not here at this dealership. I'm going to have you out of here. And you give them an accurate time as to how long it's going to take. But I like the point that you bring up, that by us going out and meeting the guests where they're comfortable, asking permission to join them, which gives them that they feel more in charge. When we do join them, that it is a conversation, that we're talking with them and we're letting them know what's going to happen from this point. This leads us to that next area. And then they've got a good idea of what's going to happen going forward. They've got a good idea of who you are, and you're not the ogre that they may have dealt with the last time at some other dealership. And they're getting a lot more comfortable situation, so that when you do come back out, when the paperwork is ready, and bring them back to the office, they're a lot more comfortable moving there.
Absolutely. It's setting that expectation and giving them a clear path of what's going to take place in the finance office. What is it that we're going to do, and take care of all the state and federal paperwork, make sure that it's all done properly. Folks, if you have any questions, we want to make sure that you ask those questions, because I don't want you leaving my office today with any unanswered questions. And that's the way it should be. I don't know, there's probably been a guest or two in the automotive industry that's had a bad experience in the finance office. Hopefully it's in none of our dealerships. However, there's probably one or two that have had a bad experience. We want to make sure that that's not the case in our dealerships. The folks that we work with, we want it to be a good experience. We want to make sure that the folks understand everything that took place in the finance office, and that they don't have any unanswered questions. Now, of course, they could think of something when they left, and we want to make sure that they know that they can contact us or the client advisor to answer those questions, et cetera. But once we do bring the guest into our office, after we went back and prepared some documents, things of that nature, we want to follow that process that we shared with them up front, that we were going to go over all the numbers the same way that they were explained with John or Sally, whoever the client advisor was at the time. Go through the numbers, make sure they're exactly the same way that they had agreed to. We're also going to go through the manufacturer's coverage with them to make sure they fully take advantage of everything they're entitled to.
I'm going to stop you right there. You mentioned keywords earlier, and those are two really big keywords.
Why is that?
Why is that? Well, I think everyone wants what they're entitled to, and I think that makes their heart beat just a little bit more, and maybe their eyes widen just a little bit more. I want to make sure you understand everything you're entitled to, so you can take full advantage of that combination of those two sentences there. It gets the customer really interested in, okay, what am I entitled to? And yes, I do want to take advantage, because in the past, a lot of times it was the reverse. They didn't know what they were entitled to, and they were taken advantage of.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of reversing the area there. And I like the point that you bring up too is that we have to go over those numbers. And if we tell them during the interview, one of the first things we're going to be doing when we get back to my office is review over all the numbers that you and your client advisor agreed to. They have that kind of, oh, okay, well, that's great. And if they had a bad experience somewhere else, and we know at some dealerships, the numbers change when they get back into the finance office, and guests are very uncomfortable with that.
Absolutely.
To the point of sometimes even blowing out of the finance office. But when you tell them up front that you're going to review over all the numbers, making sure everything that they agreed upon are the exact same numbers that you have, gives them, okay, this guy is a business manager. He's business-like, and they're feeling more comfortable with it. When you go back to the office and you actually say, now, as I mentioned, I want to go over all the numbers that you agreed to, then they have, okay, great. And then once we've done that, basically their defenses are down. When they see that the payments, the terms, the amount they're getting for all the different things are exactly what they agreed to, they're a lot more open to a conversation, which is going to be a presentation in a conversation format.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important to distinguish between defenses being a negative or a positive thing. When we say their defenses are down, we're talking about that their ears open up, not that we can take advantage of them in any way, shape, or form, because that's absolutely not the purpose of or that's not the explanation of their defenses come down. But what it is that their ears open up, and they're more likely to listen to what we have to go over with them. And it is that conversation explaining to them the one of the biggest things is going over the manufacturer's coverage, as we had mentioned before, going through the manufacturer's coverage with them so that they understand it. We see all the advertisements that are out there from the manufacturers talking about bumper-to-bumper coverage, a 3-year 36 and a 5-year 60 coverage. Do we really, from those advertisements, do we really understand what it means? I don't know. I think that people make assumptions about what it means, and they may not get it, right? And so when we go over that in the finance office, we explain it to them so they can ask questions. You can't ask questions to a TV, can you, when they go over bumper-to-bumper coverage? But as finance managers or business managers, we can explain it to them exactly how it works. We can even give examples of maybe a repair that might happen during, say, the 3 years 36. One of the examples that quite a few of my finance managers will use is a window regulator. And I was talking to one of my finance managers this morning who had just come out of boot camp, and we were talking about the same topic. And I asked him the question. I said, well, so-and-so. I said, let me ask you this question. Are those the individuals who are guests who sit in front of you or any other finance manager, do you suppose they really know how expensive automotive repairs are? And if we were to talk about a particular repair, just say it was a window regulator, would they understand how much a repair for a window regulator would be? And the answer was probably not. And I think that's the right answer, unless that individual was trading in a vehicle that had a lot of mechanical issues. Then they've been in the service.
They had to replace the window regulator.
They replaced the window regulator. They probably know the service advisors by first name basis and that sort of thing because they've been in there. But they do know how expensive repairs are. But my guess would be not everyone.
As we go over the manufacturer's warranty, and again, making sure they understand everything they're entitled to so they can take full advantage of it. One of the things we teach in boot camp is not to get it too complicated. Most people, first of all, just as you mentioned, they think bumper to bumper, this bumper to bumper coverage is going to cover everything, that everything is going to be covered for the next 3 years, 36, whatever their comprehensive coverage is.
Including those bumpers, Mike.
Including the bumpers, which are not. And so, as you mentioned, if we explain what's not going to be covered, and then it makes a lot more sense to them. But when we go over and during that 3 year, 36,000 mile coverage, let them know that they have a full powertrain warranty, which means with the exception of maintenance and wear items, and then they explain what maintenance and wear items are, the entire engine, transmission, drivetrain would be covered. I like that because if you're explaining that during the 3-year 36 comprehensive coverage, then when you're done explaining the 3-year 36 and you go to a limited powertrain warranty, they understand the difference between a full powertrain warranty and a limited powertrain warranty. Now, I like what you mentioned because most guests think 3-year 36 is going to cover everything, which it's not. And the limited powertrain warranty is limited to the powertrain. So they think the entire engine, transmission, drivetrain are going to be covered, when in fact they're not. It even gets into the point of, do most people even understand what internally lubricated means? So we can't get too caught up in trying to explain the mechanics of a vehicle, but enough to let them understand the need and the want for what it is that they're going to be offering. And I think a good verbal walk around of it, talking to them about a full powertrain warranty, and then talked about some of the areas that they've heard before: the cooling system, the electrical system, the fuel system, the exhaust system, those type of things. All the computers, microprocessors, and sensors, which virtually control everything on the car, are going to be covered. And let them know that also that all the computers, microprocessors, and sensors that have to react instantly, many times before you even realize it, taking care of a problem. That gives the guest a little bit more, wow, this is great coverage. And we want to celebrate their comprehensive coverage with them.
Definitely.
So that as we celebrate this coverage and we're talking more about it, they're starting to create the need and want, because during the interview, they've already told you that they plan on keeping the vehicle for 6 years, 7 years, 8 years long, or whatever, and they realize that they're not going to have this coverage. And so the need and want is starting to be created. And then we can walk back into the cabin area of the vehicle and talk about all the different controls, all the high-tech equipment that most people now are just taking for granted, but 5-6 years ago didn't even exist. They're seeing, again, there's no way I want to spend $30, $40, $50, $60, $70,000 or more and not have every single thing covered for the whole amount of time that I plan on owning it. So it just, the interview leading to the presentation of creating the need and the want, basically all it's doing is giving us the opportunity to let the guests now want something. And when we go into the menu will be the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think where that want comes in, Mike, is a very important step in the process. And that goes back to the guest interview when we are talking to the guests and we're asking them time and mileage. So, simply sort of using a range, because people drive different amount of mileage per year. Not everyone's the same, right? Not everyone's going to keep their vehicle the same amount of years either. So if we use sort of a range of what we're seeing in our area, for instance, in the metro area, folks, we're seeing people that are driving anywhere from 15,000 miles per year up to 25,000 miles per year. Where might you fit into that spectrum? Now, chances are they're going to fit into that spectrum, right? Because that's sort of what we see in the metro area. Now, if you have that individual who says, no, I'm driving 10,000 miles per year, they're going to drive 10,000 miles per year.
And that's the information you need to know when you're creating that menu.
Why do we need to know that information, Mike?
Because if the guest has said it, now it is true.
True. And
now we can go ahead and tailor that coverage to their actual driving needs. So not only do they see now the need and want, now that we've tailored that coverage to them, it's a lot easier for them to just say yes.
And that's exactly it. And the key to that is we're tailoring this coverage to them and to their driving habits. The one thing that I left out was the time aspect. Same question. Folks in the metro area, we're finding that people are keeping their vehicles anywhere from 5 years on the low end. We see people keeping them up to 10 years. So when they then tell us how long they're planning on keeping that vehicle, we get back right to what you're saying. We tailor that coverage exactly to their driving needs. One of the things that I found and sometimes it's the newer finance managers, the mistake we'll make is we'll get that information from the guest, and let's just say the guest said they're going to keep the vehicle for 5 years. They're driving 15,000 miles per year. if we did the math on that, if they're keeping it 5 years, by the end of that fifth year, they've driven 75,000 miles, right? One of the mistakes I see is that we've got a 10-year, 150,000 mile protection plan. And so when we get to going over the menu with the folks, we present a 10-year, 150. Now, does that make sense to that guest?
No, it's too long.
It's way too long. Why pay for something that you're not going to use? And quite often, in those situations, the guest just says, "Sorry, no thanks. Sounds pretty good, but yeah, that's not going to work out for me." However, if we tailored a 5-year, 75,000 mile protection program for them, they would probably see the need for it, right, and the value in it.
And I think letting them know, say, based on what the information you gave me earlier, that you plan on keeping this for X amount of time and this amount of miles, that's going to equate to at this time, you'd have this many miles. And we've tailored this coverage, okay, for those driving habits that people like to have things tailored,
of course,
to them. And then, again, we're kind of reminding them what they've already said.
Absolutely.
And then they see the need. Again, everything just kind of falls into place. It's interesting. We had a attendee at one of our boot camps a couple months ago that had come from another group of dealerships that we don't work with. And he'd been in finance for over 10 years. And he did pretty well. And he was recruited by, of course, one of the dealerships that we represent to come work for him, and immediately comes to boot camp. And we, of course, talk about creating the why, creating the want, and the need for what it is that we have to are going to be offering on the menu. After the first day, he comes up to me and goes, "Mike, if I had only understood just this concept 10 years ago, I can't believe, one, how many more service contracts I would have sold, how much additional income that would have brought to the dealership. And by the way, me, wow." And it's such an easy concept. You know, it's the guest likes it, they understand it, and it just makes sense. I can't believe I'm just now finding it. So it's interesting that other dealerships or other organizations teach to sometimes actually, degrade or put down the manufacturer's warranty, that it's not all that good.
Yeah.
We should be celebrating the coverage with the guest, but we do that with the information they've already told us. Okay, how long they plan on keeping it, how many miles they plan on putting on the vehicle.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you bring that up as far as degrading the manufacturer's coverage. Again, thinking way back when I first started in the industry, that was one of the things that was taught, was that we didn't spend a whole lot of time on the manufacturer's coverage because you didn't want the guest to say, "I'm good. I'm fine with the manufacturer's coverage. So thank you very much." Whereas obviously our mindset has changed. We really need to go over that manufacturer's coverage with them and show them how great it really is. However, with, again, that time and mileage conversation, the information that they shared with us is that we want that wonderful experience to continue, right? And that's one of the things that I talk about with my folks, is that to just simply ask that question to the guests. Now, Mike, you've had a wonderful experience today working with John, correct? Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what, John's one of our best associates, even though they're all top notch, but we're really glad that you had a good experience today. And one of the things that we want to do is make sure you have that same wonderful experience from day one that you own the vehicle to the last day that you own the vehicle. And that's why catering to you and your driving habits, et cetera, this is what we put together specifically for you to ensure that you're going to have that wonderful experience. And then leading into, obviously, the coverage, or reiterating the coverage that you've already gone through with them.
Well, we've seen, obviously, service contract penetration increase year over year over year. I can remember, you mentioned 1,000 years ago, back when I started, that if you were at 40% service contract penetration, wow, I mean, you were doing good. And then it went to 45, and then to 50, 55, 60. Now we're seeing 65, 70, 75, 80% service contract penetration. We're happy with that. There's that continued increase, but I think it's all because our business managers, our finance managers are understanding the need of creating the want and the need. And it's just now becoming a lot easier for that guest to say yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. 100% right on that. And I think we can attribute that to the things that we are just talking about. Making sure that the guest has a full understanding of the manufacturer's coverage, how wonderful it is, and that experience can go forward. But also, vehicles have changed over time, haven't they? I know my 2005 Ford Expedition isn't the same as the 2022 vehicles that are out today. You had mentioned it earlier as far as the computers, the sensors, the modulators, all of the things that are packed into the vehicles now. And quite often, those are convenience items. It's the adaptive cruise control. It's the infotainment center with all the touch screen that runs the heating, the cooling, the stereo system, the backup camera, things of that nature. When we put those things in the vehicles for safety purposes, but also comfort, they probably have a higher chance of breaking down.
I agree. We've focused a lot on creating the want and the need for the service contracts. I do want to finish up talking about the other thing that we're going to be talking about during our presentation of the manufacturer's warranty is creating the need and want for the other things that we're going to be offering on the menu. Express 5, of course, is probably one of the most successful programs out there because it's taking 4 individual programs that we used to have to sell separately, putting them all into one at a great price for the customer, and then adding in roadside assistance on there. But creating the need for windshield coverage, creating the need for key coverage, creating the need for tire and wheel coverage, creating the need for dent and ding coverage, and then also creating the need for our chemical applications. There's so many different things that we can do, and I think in our next podcast that'll be one of the things we want to talk about is really kind of breaking down that presentation a little bit more as to how we can very quickly create the need for each one of those things, and then ended up with, how we're going to create the need for GAP, because GAP has nothing to do with the manufacturer's warranty, right, but it's a crucial part, and quite frankly, one of the most accepted products. Guests understand the need for the GAP. So, in our future, probably in our next podcast, that's something that we're going to want to talk about is creating that need and want for all the different products, so that we're not just seeing a service contract, but we're seeing 2, 3 products per deal coming in. And it's all things that the guest has chosen that they want. And leaving feeling good about the choice that they made, and hopefully feeling good that, hey, I'm glad I decided to buy at this dealership and not that other place down the street.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Any parting thoughts?
Not really, Mike. I appreciate you inviting me to be with you today. I enjoyed it.
Well, it's been fun. Basically you and I, things that we talk about all the time. So with that, we'll end this, and we look forward to seeing everyone in our next podcast.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.